I'm back! Megan 4, Schmoved 0. Not really, because I've actually been too nauseous to eat or drink anything. Not that, anyone is caring about my sad little COVID life, but I've been surviving on ice poles and dry pretzels. I'm stuffed. Hey my wee gremlins, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for another spooky episode of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. I'm not going to get too vigorous with the shoulder action this week because the fever is still very real. If you like all things true crime, supernatural, UFO, conspiracy theory, and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you each week with our true crime killer weekends, and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our weirdo Wednesdays and Left for Reddit episodes, where we'll discuss something spooky I've heard. And I'm not talking about my orange hands. I will leave a small disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. It does involve details of violent crime, home invasion, PTSD and mental illness. If that's a trigger point for you, then please feel free to turn away now. Hey my wee gremlins, how are you? Yes, I am back. Am I healthy? Well, not really. But it's all good, okay? I get knocked down, but I get up again. In this particular episode, we have a lot to unpack. So, before I go off on one of my famous Megan True Crime tangents, if I haven't already, it's time for me to introduce you to this week's amazing sponsor and a personal favourite of mine, HelloFresh. If you've been watching my channel for a while now, you will know two things are true. One, I love HelloFresh, and two, I cannot wait for the fall season to begin. But I know with school starting back and the end of summer vacations, life can get a little bit hectic for all you families out there. However, with HelloFresh's easy to follow foolproof recipes ready in 30 minutes or less, you can easily transition back into your daily routine. You can choose from a huge selection of meals, snacks, lunches and desserts that will keep everyone smiling around the dinner table. Imagine it for a second. No more chaotic Sunday trips to the busy grocery store. No more screaming kids desperate to get back home to play their video games. As you all know, I'm obsessed with family, more specifically right now my little niece and nephew, and I try and be as eco-friendly as possible so that I can make sure they grow up in a world as beautiful as they are. That's why I'm truly impressed that HelloFresh have partnered up with Plastic Bank to prevent over 10 million bottles from entering the ocean each year. There's really nothing better than a home-cooked meal, and HelloFresh delivers your carefully pre-portioned fresh ingredients directly from the farm to your front door. Their fit and wholesome options allow you to maintain your health and fitness goals, all without sacrificing on flavour. But don't just take my word for it, try HelloFresh out for yourself. Go to hellofresh.com and use code MEGAN16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. That's hellofresh.com and use code MEGAN16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 free gifts. Now back to the show. I also wanted to say a big cringeworthy thank you to everyone for their feedback. Feedback? See, we'll get there in the end, Megan. On the podcast idea that I had. But the more that I think about it, I don't even know, do I have a voice for a podcast? Sometimes I'll be listening to one and I'll feel like I accidentally called a 0800 number. Hello there, my name's Destiny and we're here to make true crime sound sexy. Then there's me. Hi, my name's Megan. There's been a brutal murder. Stay away if you can, boys. But anywho, enough about wee me. we're here to talk about true crime. And this week's case is, well, I don't even know if I have a word for what this is. As you'll all know, each week I sift through tragic case after case, and naturally I've become desensitized to all the 911 calls and crime scene photos. So when I heard about a murder that literally had me in tears and shaking in fear, I knew I had to share it with you guys. We've all heard this urban legend, outdated and swimming in a stigmatised view of mental illness. It's a dark and stormy night, and a young woman is home alone. As she goes about her nightly routine, she switches on the radio. Suddenly, over the airwaves comes a frightening emergency broadcast. A mental patient known locally for committing violent offences has escaped the nearby insane asylum. But, much worse than that, he was last seen in her neighbourhood. As our young damsel in distress picks up the telephone to call her husband, who's working late at the office, to tell him to come home right now, as she'd feel much safer with a big strong man in the house, she hears a thud coming from the other room. Eventually, after a few rings, her husband picks up. But how strange. There's no one on the other end of the phone, and suddenly the line goes dead. Scary little story, isn't it? Well, on the 14th of September 2015, it would become much more than that for a beautiful mother of two. Tonight, everyone, we will be discussing the tragic murder of Nicola Cross, the last call. The town of Hemel Hempstead, based just an hour outside of London, England, could be described in most areas as idyllic, with its classic St Mary's Church, complete with old-fashioned steeple and soft English charm. However, its council estates could be slightly more dangerous, with the secret cannabis farms and also illegal drug trades. It was actually named the ugliest town in Britain in 2013, which I think's a little bit harsh. I'm sure, like most places in the UK, there's good and bad areas. I actually think that Hemel Hempstead looks quite nice. Then again, I was also raised in Glasgow, Scotland, so you know, my bar's set quite low. Regardless of its unfortunate 2013 status, it was home to many young families, one of these being Dan and Nicola Cross along with their two children, Stanley and Isabella, aged 6 and 3. Dan, who had been with Nicola for over 11 years, worked in IT, specialising in computer science for a company named Kingston Communications. But Nicola's career path couldn't have been more different. She had more of a creative side, which led her to a career in crafting. The stay-at-home mum started up her own business called Spruced Tags, selling personalised gifts and cards. Nicola, nicknamed Nikki by those who were closest to her, was known as being extremely talented. Her husband Dan would say that she was a perfect wife and mummy and always lived by her own motto of never give up. The couple had run in the same social circles for years, but in 2004, things changed. Across the sticky nightclub dance floor and tacky neon lights, they locked eyes, and as they say, the rest is history. After 4 years of dating, Dan and Nikki decided to take the next big step and started planning a traditional family wedding at home. But it wasn't meant to be. There was the big 2008 financial crash, which also thwarted Dan and Nikki's plans of a summer wedding that year. That was okay, however, because in 2009, fate had better ideas and they became mummy and daddy to a little boy named Stanley. They found a family home in the area of Grove Hill, and it wasn't long after that they soon gave birth to another baby, a little girl named Isabella. Whilst they were undeniably happy, life wasn't without its troubles, and practical thinker Dan was always chasing financial success. He said that he always wanted to provide a beautiful life for his new family, and probably, like most men at the time, felt societal pressure to do so. Nikki also dreamt of being a stay-at-home mum with enough time to enjoy Stanley and Isabella's childhood years before they headed off to primary school. The couple worked as a team to make those dreams a reality, and somewhere in between changing nappies and late nights at the office, in 2013 they were finally able to afford their dream wedding. In June 2013, Nikki, stunned in her strapless sweetheart ball gown along with her two-tier satin trim veil, she was an absolute vision. In each snapshot, her smile is the main focus, beaming, so in love with her new husband, and for a moment in time it seemed like they had it all. However, soon Nikki would be taken into hospital with respiratory problems, having severe asthma attacks, and for a short moment in time the family didn't think that she was gonna make it through. Later on, Dan would recall a tough conversation that he and Nikki had shared, in which she had expressed her final wishes should her symptoms only worsen. She took his hand in hers and told him that he was not to drown in his grief, but he was to move on and be happy and make sure that their kids led a happy life. And in that pivotal moment, Dan made his sick wife a promise, one that secretly in the back of his mind he was hoping he would never have to keep. But remember guys, Nikki's own motto was never give up. She was a fighter, and of course she battled her illness, and pretty soon she was back where she belonged, at home with her family. The weeks leading up to September 2015 were full of important and significant moments for the Cross family. They'd just spent a carefree 2 weeks in Mallorca basking in the sunshine, a holiday they would never forget. The IT company Dan worked for had restructured, and because of this, he was scheduled to travel to Hull for a work event. The night before he left, he and Nikki had attended a concert with friends, and as they danced the night away, the stress of the previous years just melted away. The morning of Monday, the 14th of September 2015, brought a lot of things with it. The main thing being a headache. Yes, and as all my mums know out there, a hangover does not mean a day off from your kids, as Nikki was soon realising. Stanley and Isabella were just getting over a really bad flu, so most of that day Nikki was playing nurse, whilst Dan was 3.5 hours away on his business trip. That night, most of Dan's workmates decided to go out to the local pub, but him being a loyal family man, thought he would ditch the beers, head back to his hotel room for a late night phone call with his wife and kids. Nikki spoke to her husband at around 7:30 p.m. that night, and then he headed off to bed, exhausted from the day's festivities. At around 11:30 p.m, however, he woke up to see a new message from his wife. She tried to reach him earlier that night, but got his answering machine, so she asked him to give her a call back as soon as he got the message, which he did, when an anxious Nikki answered the phone. Earlier that evening, as she was putting the kids to bed, she had heard a loud thud coming from her front door. She wasn't expecting any company that night, so who could it be? As she made her way towards the door to check out the situation, she heard a man's voice demanding that she let him inside. Of course, this was the last thing that Nicola was going to do, but the stranger persisted and began banging on the door. Nikki then ran upstairs to a nearby window to get a better look, but what she saw only made her more scared. This guy is now punching and kicking the family car. She bravely tells him to stop what he's doing, but he just mumbles something back at her, and she can't quite make it out, but for a second she believes that she hears him say, "I'm here for the kids." And now petrified Nikki calls the police, and they tell her that they're on their way and they'll be there soon to put a stop to all this madness. When she sees the police car arrive, she feels relieved. They're here, so I must be safe now. She trusted them to do their jobs. She shouldn't have. Later on that night, after the police had been and gone and Nikki was getting ready for bed, she could have sworn that she heard a noise coming from the back of the house. Maybe it was just her paranoia from the events earlier on that evening, but she decided she would feel a lot better if she could just call Dan. When she finally got a hold of him, at first she actually apologised for calling police, fearing that she'd been too overdramatic, but Dan was always his wife's biggest supporter and told her that no, she definitely did the right thing. Nicola told him that only moments before she'd heard strange sounds coming from downstairs and that she was now worrying that the mystery man had come back. As the police had left hours ago and still Nikki hadn't heard anything back from them, Dan suggested that maybe, just to put her mind at ease, she should contact the local station on the house landline. He thought that worst case scenario, they would put her mind at ease and tell her that this sketchy dude was sitting in a jail cell and that the creepy noises downstairs were nothing more than the wind. But they couldn't say that, because when Nikki returned to Dan on the phone, she informed him that yes, police spoke to that man, but because he was unarmed, they let him go and never thought to let Nikki know that. Dan, who was secretly worried at this point but didn't want to alarm Nikki, assured her that the guy was probably long gone, but just to be on the safe side, she and the kids should try and get out of the house. His parents were actually on holiday at the time and only lived a short drive away. They had left their spare keys to their home, and he told Nikki to pack a bag, get the kids in the car, and take them round to the in-laws' house. She quickly agreed to Dan's plan, maybe even feeling a little bit silly. She ran upstairs to pack her things, all the while staying on the line to her husband. "Did you hear that?" Nicola said. He hadn't heard anything from the other side of the phone. "A loud bang coming from downstairs," she said. Silence fell over the phone line. Dan waited for his wife to speak, but within seconds, all he would hear were her screams. Someone was in their home and Nikki was telling them to get out. She was pleading with the intruder, begging him the whole time not to harm her 2 children. She repeatedly said over and over again, "You don't have to do this. Please don't do this." And he coldly responded with 2 words, "I do." Dan sat on the edge of the bed in his hotel room in Hull, 200 miles away. That's when the screams began, as 37-year-old Nicola Cross was stabbed 10 times. He listened ear pressed to his mobile phone, helpless, unable to do anything. As his beautiful wife lay dying, he begged her not to give up, saying over and over again, "Don't you dare leave me." A few seconds passed by and there was silence on the end of the phone. And in that moment, Dan knew that Nikki was gone. He then started to fear that his 2 children would be next. He called 999 from his hotel room phone, but that was a nightmare as well because Dan was in Hull. The dispatchers were confused as to where to send officers. A frustrated Dan had to repeat himself several times before anyone would take him seriously. At this point, he already knew that Nicola was gone. He could feel it in his bones, but he was desperately trying to save his children when out of nowhere, he heard voices. The voices of Stanley and Isabella being led out of their room by the killer. All he could think about in that moment was where was this person taking his children and for what twisted purpose. As the kids were led through the hallway past Nicola's body, one of them could be heard saying, "Mummy's heart," and the other one said, "Why did this happen to our family?" The intruder made his way down the stairs, carrying Isabella in one arm and holding Stanley's hand with the other, just as law enforcement finally arrived on scene. Having heard everything from his mobile phone, Dan now knew that the children were safe. But all he could do was wait. So he disconnected the call, walked down to the hotel lobby, and just paced back and forth until police entered the hotel and told him that yes, his children were alive and unharmed, but that Nicola had died from her injuries. Investigators showed Dan images of his wife's killer, assuming that because of his keen interest in their children, he must have known the family personally. But this person was a complete stranger to Dan. So why did he want to hurt their family? The brutal murderer, 23-year-old Marcin Porczynski, who originally hailed from Kielce in central Poland, had only moved to the UK months before. A car mechanic by trade, he'd come over with the promise of a job as a warehouse worker for the Martin Brewer Distribution Centre. Even more terrifying was the fact that he only lived 5 minutes away from Dan and Nikki, but had no personal relationship with them whatsoever. At the time, Marcin shared a flat with 19-year-old Robert DL, who was also a warehouse worker. In the weeks leading up to the vicious attack, Robert would say that his roommate was acting suspiciously. He wasn't going to work, and on one occasion, he came home to find his flatmate sitting in the dark in their garden, completely catatonic. On the evening of September 14th, 2015, Marcin left his flat and began walking towards the Crosses home in Grove Hill. He may have been watching the family for weeks before this. No one knows why. After harassing Nikki earlier on in the evening, he was briefly questioned by law enforcement. But despite the fact that he was rambling incoherently about the Crosses' children and wanting to take their children, nothing was done and he was told to go back to his flat. He did go back to his flat, where he found a knife from the kitchen, put it in his pocket, and made his way back to the Cross family home. He'd actually broken into 2 homes that night. Dan and Nicola's next door neighbour, a Mr. Shah, had just gotten out of the shower when he heard a sound of glass breaking. Marcin had broken into the wrong house, and he fled when he heard a male voice telling him to get out. But he wouldn't stay away for long. Police arrived on scene after receiving a 999 call from Mr. Shah. But little did they know that this crazed intruder was terrorising another family only yards away. The whole time that Dan Cross sat helpless on his phone, police were literally next door. At one point during their visit to Mr. Shah, the officers heard Nicola's screams coming from the next house, but they decided not to enter the premises for one of 2 reasons. One, they said the front door was locked, so they couldn't, break in the front door. And 2, they said the other entryway, which is how the intruder got in, was full of broken glass, so it was too dangerous for them. Now, bear in mind that at this point, they didn't know that the attacker wasn't harming the children as well. Protect and serve. One police officer would later make the statement that he saw Nicola covered in blood, banging on the bathroom window, begging for help, and he did nothing. Upon his arrest for the murder of the young mother, Marcin received a psychiatric evaluation where it was discovered that he was suffering from delusional paranoid schizophrenia. His diagnosis left Nicola's loved ones further questioning how local law enforcement handled her initial 999 call. This man was described as being severely mentally ill and in the midst of a delusional psychotic episode, but despite all this, police didn't think that he could possibly be a danger to himself or to others out on the street that night. In Marcin's mind, he heard voices telling him that Nikki was holding 2 children captive in her house and that she was starving them. He truly believed that if he didn't take the children from the home, something bad would happen to not only them, but to his family back in Poland. How could law enforcement miss these huge warning signs? Unfortunately, they weren't the only ones. Marcin's own friends and family said they had no knowledge of his mental illness. His roommate Robert did say he had his own suspicions in the days leading up to the attack and even followed him that night when he went back to the Cross family home. Marcin would later plead guilty to manslaughter with diminished responsibility, and he was later taken to Rampton Psychiatric Hospital to be held indefinitely. The fallout left behind from this case was massive. Dan Cross was fighting residual trauma, all whilst trying to be a single dad to 2 young children. He sadly suffered from PTSD, in which he would find himself sitting on the edge of the bed in that hotel room, reliving that conversation he had with Nikki over and over again, trying to figure out if there was anything he could have done differently. But replaying that conversation in his mind would never bring Nikki back again, and the blame would only consume him, as he thought to himself that if he had been home that night, maybe Nicola would still be alive. Dan was struggling, and he wasn't the only one either. Little 6-year-old Stanley still remembered a great deal about that horrific night and soon began to suffer from night terrors. Dan got the kids into counselling pretty quickly, and the family started trying to build a life around their new normal. The Crosses found comfort in their extended family, and Dan and the kids moved in with his parents and put the home in Grove Hill up for sale. He would later say in an interview that he would sometimes go back to the old house just as a way to feel close to his late wife. For a really long time, a dark cloud followed Dan around. Lost in the idea of what could have been, he feared that he would never be happy again. The last time he'd truly been happy in his life, his young wife was killed in the most brutal and random of attacks. And because of this, he had started associating joy with loss, assuming that every good moment in his life would inevitably be followed by a horrific one. Dan would later say in interviews that he avoided therapy for many reasons, but mainly because of male pride and toxic masculinity. At the time, he felt like he just had to man up and get on with it, but he soon realised that his PTSD and being a good father couldn't coexist, and therefore he took the brave leap to get himself some help. Exercise was pivotal to Dan's recovery, and later on he would even take part in the television series SAS Who Dares Wins, in which ex-soldiers put regular everyday Joes through the Special Air Services screening process. During the show, Dan was pushed to his emotional and physical limit, but he won over the hearts of the UK public when he shared the devastating details of Nicola's murder. Nikki's family have taken great care in ensuring that her legacy lives on. The charity Nikki's Wishes was created in order to help children who are suffering from family bereavement. Her sister Sarah took part in a sponsored run in 2018 for an incredible charity called Victim Support. Dan, Nicola's husband, would later go on to co-found an organisation called Strong Men, offering active one-on-one counselling for men struggling with grief. In a case like this, with so many missed red flags and what ifs, it would be easy to get swept away in that, but it's not what Nikki would have wanted. She'd expressed once before that if anything were to happen to her, Dan was to focus on the positives and move on. And in 2019, he finally did just that, marrying mental health clinician Alexandra Wells. Dan claims that she was a gift from heaven and the push from Nicola that he needed to finally begin again. Alex specialises in child therapy for under fives and has used her expertise to ensure that Stanley and Isabella never forget their incredible mummy. As a family, they create memory boxes, and she even uses sense memory therapy as a way to keep Nikki's spirit alive for the kids. In July 2021, the family received another blessing from the heavens, a beautiful baby girl. The bravery that Nicola Cross showed on that fateful night will never be forgotten, as she stood between her babies and a killer. Had she not been so courageous, who knows what would have become of the Cross children. Life is an everyday battle for Dan Cross and Nicola's loved ones. However, one thing is for sure, they will continue to honour her wishes and they will never give up. If you'd like to learn more about or donate to any of the amazing organisations mentioned in today's episode, then please follow the link in the description box below. If you liked this week's episode, please give it a big thumbs up. For me, it really helps support this wee channel of mine. If you're watching for the first time, then please hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you would like to see what this little loser is up to in our everyday life apart from bad fake tan, then follow me, not home because that's illegal, on Instagram at Megan True Crime. I also have a TikTok page at megan.truecrime. And if you're 97 million years old and you still have Twitter, then you can follow me on Twitter at Megan True Crime. Personally, I think we all deserve a bar of chocolate, a margarita, a glass of wine, a cigar, whatever your poison after that one. I don't normally get emotional in reading these cases to you guys, you know that, but this one just really struck a chord with me. Nicola just really reminded me of my own sister, and her kids are similar ages apart, and it just shows that how easily that could have been someone that I care about and someone that I love, and my heart goes out to the Cross family and all those who loved and knew Nikki. She seemed like an amazing mum. So as always, my wee gremlins, I love you all so much, so please remember to lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and at the end of every phone call, tell them that you love them, because you never know which one could be your last. See ya! Bye!